This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. This episode is about the United States' first state-supported college for women and the women who fought for it. Columbus, Mississippi was the home of the Columbus Female Institute from 1847 to 1844, with a brief hiatus during the Civil War. The Institute was a high school offering advanced courses for the wealthy white daughters of Columbus and beyond. It was very similar to many other such colleges and seminaries located around the South. The Columbus Female Institute was originally founded by Colonel A. Kincannon in 1847 and was officially chartered in March of 1848. In the late 1850s, Holly Springs Female Institute graduate Sallie, Eola Reneau began a writing campaign to convince the Mississippi legislature to fund free higher education for free white women in the state. Age 20 and fueled by her enthusiasm, she got the state legislature to agree to create a women's college, but it would be in Yalobusha County. But the state provided no funds for building or operation. Reneau continued to press the issue, but the Civil War broke out. She renewed her efforts for public college for women in 1872 after the war. But the legislature voted to create a women's college at the University of Mississippi and would name it Reneau Female University of Mississippi and would make Sallie its first president. However, again, the bill got zero financial backing from the legislature, and Reneau University died on the legislature vine in 1873. Reneau, at some point during the Civil War, became a trained practical nurse, and she would found several different agencies during that time, one of which was the Mississippi Nightingales during the Civil War, was also an advocate for the poor. And so after the failure of Reneau University, she went to Memphis in 1878 when there was a yellow fever outbreak. She wrote letters and articles and convinced Northern philanthropists to send nutritious food and medications south. Unfortunately, she fell ill with the disease and died at the age of 41. Her dreams unfulfilled for a women's state college. Another advocate who was ardent for women's education in Mississippi, and it came about the same time, was Olivia Valentine Hastings. Olivia came from a wealthy family that, like so many others after the Civil War, lost the bulk of their fortune. She observed so many impoverished and skillless widows left behind after that war. Hastings believed industrial and or vocational training programs that taught women marketable trades would go far in extracting them from the abject poverty they were now living. In the early 1880s, she began authoring letters to the Jackson Clarion Ledger newspaper advocating free public industrial education for white women. In 1883, she began corresponding with Annie Coleman Peyton, another women's education advocate. In 1884, State Senator John Martin of Claiborne County wrote the bill for a public industrial college for women. Annie Peyton, who was born in 1852 in Madison, Mississippi, was also from a fairly wealthy family, and she would eventually attend the Canton Female Seminary before attending Whitworth Methodist College for Women in Brookhaven, Mississippi. She graduated as valedictorian of her class in 1872. She returned to teach for 2 years before marrying attorney Ephraim Peyton. Her beloved private church-owned college was constantly on the brink of collapse, and Annie felt women's education access was too dependent on private dollars, just like Whitworth was. She believed the only answer was a state-supported liberal arts college for women. She convinced the trustees at Brookhaven to give their school to the state to create a state college for just that purpose. Unfortunately, the terms of the endowment from Reverend M.J. Whitworth, who founded the school, indicated if the property left church hands, it must revert back to his heirs. So that closed that effort. Annie was not to be deterred. In the 1880 legislature, she convinced Aberdeen Senator Reuben Reynolds to introduce the bill for a state college for women. He concurred if she drafted the bill. She drafted the bill, and the bill passed the Senate but never got into the House because Reynolds was absent and the papers for the bill were mysteriously misplaced. It was too late in the session to rewrite and resubmit the bill. Some suggested they just add a women's college up at Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi, aka the same school that they had tried to build that called the Reneau, for which previously had no funding. However, finally in August of 1881, a Reverend George S. Rodebush told the people of Hazelhurst it was past time there was a state-supported women's college. He was quite a popular tent circuit speaker. The Clarion Steam Publishing House published his speech in a pamphlet, and it was scattered around the state. Annie discovered a pamphlet written by Olivia Hastings, and the two began corresponding. James McNeely of Hinds County offered to present a new bill for a state college for women in 1884 if Annie again drafted it. She reached out to her pal John Martin, or Hastings' pal John Martin, intended to resubmit their previous bill to create the college. McNeely and Martin united behind Martin's bill to create an industrial institute and college. The bill passed, but now they had to pick a suitable place. What town would the new school be in? Hazelhurst put in the first bid, but that would require considerable investment of time and dollars in all new buildings on an empty section of land. Columbus proposed the winning and most generous bid. The trustees of the Columbus Female Institute would transfer all buildings and properties to the state. The school was already equipped with classrooms, dorm rooms, cooking and dining facilities, and housing for the teachers and staff. The school was transferred to the state. The state then added a clock tower on what was then called Old Main, or today Callaway Hall. They built Orr and Moore Hall, which sat where Whitfield Auditorium, now called Rent Auditorium, currently stands. The school officially opened in October of 1885 and welcomed 341 students. Annie Coleman Peyton and Olivia Hastings served on the school's instructional design committee. Peyton chaired that committee. Hastings would eventually establish a loan fund for future indigent students. And in 1889, the IINC produced its first graduating class. Annie Coleman Peyton would go on to watch her daughters, Annie, Artie, and Mary Lou, all graduate from IINC. Reneau Hall at Ole Miss was then named for Sallie Reneau. Hastings and Peyton Halls at MUW are all named for Olivia Hastings and Annie Peyton. According to the commercial appeal, when Annie Peyton died, she was considered, quote, one of the most brilliant women who ever born in Mississippi. Her funeral was held at First Methodist in Columbus, and the entire student body was in attendance. In 1920, the school was renamed Mississippi State College for Women. In 1974, the name was again changed to Mississippi University for Women. In 1982, the school was forced to admit men and has been proudly admitting men ever since. Columbus gets to claim it is the home of the first state-supported college for women in the entire United States. The W, as we who have attended call it, has many notable alumni, including Blanche Colton Williams, who started the O. Henry Short Story Awards, Annie Denman, a poet, Denise Dillard, a playwright, Chris Fryer, the Zac Brown Band drummer, Elaine Goodman, an artist, C.T. Salazar, a poet who now lives on the Delta, Penelope Stokes, the author, William Faulkner's mother, Tennessee Williams' mother, Lenore Prather, the first woman on the Mississippi Supreme Court to serve as a Supreme Court Justice, Major Junie Coursey, Evelyn McPhail, Shannon A. Truesdale Rader, of the first female Navy crash and salvage firefighting crew member who was on board the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, author Eudora Welty, and, of course, me, Shannon Evans, the author and podcaster. And I want to thank you for coming on tonight's episode of the Tom Bigby Tales. Until next time.